What's up, everybody? We're here at Overloon War Museum, and this was Militracks 2026, and I'm here with the Weald Foundation, and they brought their newly restored Sdkfz 223, which is behind us. This was such a cool vehicle to see at the event, and so I'm going to have the team talk a little bit about its history, its specifications and mechanics, and some of the driving experience, and you can see some of the footage from when we went on a ride. So come along and let's learn something. I'll turn the camera over to them. Let's go.
Hi, my name is Duarte. I'm doing the research for the Weald Foundation together with Hilary Doyle, and I've done a lot of research for the armored car that we got here behind us. So our Sdkfz 223 came from Sisoun, Brittany in France. It was found in August 1944. We at the moment don't know how we ended up in there. We had some ideas how we went up in there, but we at one point thought it was going to be connected to brass parts, which was a raid that the Germans done to save 120 paratroopers that were made prisoner. But unfortunately, it didn't connect all of the dots. But we now believe it was part of a unit that was retreating through Sisoun, and possibly they had to abandon the vehicle in there, and that's how we ended up in there. But it's the earliest survivor of its kind. September 1939 when it was assembled, and that's why I don't think you can see it under this light, but there's the dark brown camouflage skin, the two pattern, dark grey and dark brown, and you will see the German crosses that are the ones used in Poland campaign. So that's the latest research we've done to it. For a while, if you look for our vehicle on YouTube, you'll see it just painted grey. It was just because we didn't know exactly which camouflage and what crosses to paint. So a lot of time went into that just to find out. And we believe that our armored car was issued as a replacement just at the end of the Polish campaign. And we had, because we don't know all of his provenance and we don't know how it was in August 1944, that's why we decided to restore it exactly as it was coming out of the factory in 1939. When we were looking into how we ended up in Sisoun and the initial connection to the brass parts raid, we thought we had a lot of quite strong evidence based on the reports we were finding. But then when we actually found some documentation, and based as well on the book that has been written about the raid itself, we started noticing that while they went really close to Sisoun, there was a big question mark, which is Sisoun is a bit out of place through the route that they went, so it wouldn't make sense they actually went in there. And then shortly after, we actually found documents from early that year that the Germans already had a plan. If Brittany was invaded, they had routes to escape down to Brest, and Sisoun is one of the key points in there where the troops will gather and continue their retreat. So that's why now we got that possible connection that it's a different unit, we just don't know which one is it. On the research as well, on the actual restoration, I found it quite interesting was the German crosses, because it's not common to see just the Polish cross, and while actually looking to all of the details, I was quite surprised that the initial order came in July 1939, and in October 1939 they changed the orders to the more typical cross that you'll see on other vehicles across. So that cross in there only survived about 3 months, and there's no strong evidence, but it's a lot of reports that links it to troops complaining that a big white cross just showed like a big target and it was focused by the enemies. So shortly after they asked it to be changed, basically. So and it didn't take long for the German High Command to actually change it. So that's why it was quite interesting to see these crosses painted, and it's actually interesting to get people asking why these and not the other ones, which usually is more known as well. So the restoration it started a long time ago. So the first phase is the gathering of parts. Foundation, through his founder Michael Gibb, has been collecting all of these parts as much as he can through a span of 20, 25 years, even maybe longer than that. Then there needs to be an amount of parts enough for us to start restoration. And the main bit was always the chassis. If we didn't have the proper chassis, we couldn't start it at all. And then the second part is enough research done so we can understand how it was put together as well, because there's no drawings, surviving drawings, anything like that. It's not like you just find, you know, on a kit that you just get everything and you just start doing it straight away. So we actually started the project more heavily in 2019, and then this one was finished in 2024, but it was done in together with our 222 that we also got, and at the same time we've done part of the 261 that we also have, but that's a long time from now. So our projects don't span on 12 months or 24 months, they span in usually almost like decades. If you put everything together, but yeah.
So I'm Alex, I'm an apprentice with the Weald Foundation. I've been here about 3 years, and I actually started on the 223. This is the first vehicle that I've worked on. Not since it started, it was already under restoration when I joined, but it was not near complete when I started, so I've learned with the team, and I've been with the team through most of it. It's a light reconnaissance vehicle, leichter Panzersparwagen. So there were 3 main vehicles that were used for reconnaissance by the Germans. There were the 222, 223 and 261. 222 was armed with a 20mm cannon and an MG34. It was mainly for engaging the enemy whilst gathering reconnaissance. 261 had extremely powerful radios in it and no armament, and between the two was the 223, which is what we've got here, with radios powerful enough to talk back to headquarters to most of the front, but also armed with an MG34 in case the enemy engaged. But that is not something that ideally the crew would want to happen. It's only got 8mm, I believe, of armor protection, heavily angled, but it won't stop anything more than a rifle round, a bit of small arms, open topped as well, with grenade mesh over some of it but not over all of it. So if you're standing in the turret, that's probably the worst place to be, and you feel that when you're in the vehicle. It's not well protected at all from enemy fire, but it's not meant to be, because like I say, you don't want to be engaging the enemy in it. It can go, yeah, about 40 kilometers an hour. It's got a 3.5 litre Horsch V8 in it, so it's the same engine as in the Horsch civilian car, but in fact it's the same chassis as the Horsch civilian car as well, but it's got approximately 2 tons extra armor protection on it, so it's maneuverable more so than a tank or any of the later war reconnaissance vehicles, but it's again at the cost of armor protection and firepower in this case. Steering, same idea as a 251, 250 half tracks. The steering wheel's inverted, so that is, I personally don't drive it, but Tom, he does drive it, and it's very difficult to get used to and very hard. There's no power steering. It's incredibly unergonomic vehicle to be in any position, driver, turret or radio operator. They used them from the start of the war until about 1942. They started to phase them out, but they were in service the whole way through the war. This survived until 1944. The complexity of the whole thing, but it's got four-wheel steering. It's probably the most advanced thing, selectable four-wheel steering as well. So they were known when that was on to roll over slightly, which is not ideal, but it's an interesting little thing that the Germans had on what for any other nation would have been an expendable vehicle in a reconnaissance thing. They went to the effort of four-wheel steering and windscreens with little windscreen wipers that you can to put them in and out. They really went to some effort with it that they arguably didn't need to. So this antenna arrangement here, because it's got earlier ones had a 30-watt sender and later upgraded to an 80-watt. That you can wind it up from the inside to communicate, and it's got a clutch system with a very strong spring. If you drive this into a tree, it'll fold down instead of snapping. again, something really advanced that for a reconnaissance vehicle, nobody else really would have done it. It's a vehicle you won't see anywhere else in the world, so you know, to see the little details, the engineering stuff, like finding out exactly what a plaque would have said back in its day, and getting it printed, putting it in, machining the machine gun mount and things like that. It's all the uniqueness of it. Armoured bolts that are all over it for deflecting bullets. They're not regular bolts. You can see them here. They've got conical heads, stuff like that. All interesting little bits that don't exist anywhere. You can't buy them anywhere, so I get to figure out how to make them and make them.
My name's Tom. I'm the workshop manager at the Weald Foundation. I've been driving it ever since it was restored. That's 2 years now, probably. 2 years probably driving it since the first time we had it out. So it's got one really low sort of crawler gear for crawling up hills. It's got 4 forward gears and obviously 1 reverse. And as Alex said, the steering is a bit awkward to get used to. It takes a little while to get used to knowing what gear to be in up hills and when to change up to the next gear. And you haven't got much headroom, so you've got to sort of hunch down to see through the vision port, because you haven't got any mirrors, so you can't see behind you. So you can only see sort of that much really, 90 degrees in front of you. But it's not too bad, because you've got the width indicators at the front that show you where your corners are, so you don't hit anything on the way past. It feels a bit underpowered because it's heavier than the vehicles the engine was made for, because it was made for the lighter horse cars. Been experienced, because with this we've only driven around sort of our yard or the field, but this going up the hills and round the bends is quite nice through the woods. And obviously to drive with the other vehicles here. I kind of think that how often are you going to see this vehicle and the Panzer III next to each other? Last time we had the starter motor started not to work, but this time it's been pretty good really, been reliable.
It's the best part. So one is never finished. There's always research that you need to do it. There's always little things we're always looking for, interior bits that we don't know exactly how it is yet, so we haven't done it. But I think even from the rest of the team, the best part is when we can actually take it out. I know sometimes it's a bit stressful, because then we start finding things that go wrong, but we'll fix it. But seeing it out there, and then the public enjoyment, today was quite good when we started going around in the circuit here. We had loads and loads of people. I even told Tom and Alex that at one point I actually saw people running to and then take pictures, and so it's quite exciting to see people interested on such a rare vehicle, because this is it. You won't see it much more than anyone else. There's another one that will be later, but earliest one, that's it.
At school, I always had an interest in military history, but specifically vehicles, so I had a choice: go to university and learn military history, which would have been a bit too general for me, or find something specific. And I found a video from Tankfest 2019 of our Jagdpanther going around the arena. That opened the door, found out who the Weald Foundation were, got in touch and got an apprenticeship. And it has been amazing. So the people that you meet, the stuff that you learn, skills. Every time I learn something new or a new person, people say this is a dying trade. It's good to see young people learning it and all that, and it's stuff you can't really learn anywhere else. So.
It's just a chance to work on vehicles like this, really. And it's the sort of archaeology side of it as well. Like you have a rusty box, and you've got to cut the rust holes out and put pieces in to try and keep as much of the originality as possible.
Thank you guys so much for watching. It was awesome to keep up with the Foundation and see their newest vehicle. If you're interested in more, I've linked to their website, their social media, and their YouTube down in the description. Check out some of their workshop progress and the history of their awesome vehicles. And if you're interested in seeing them yourself, their Stug is going to be at Tankfest this year, and they're bringing their restored running Jagdpanther to Operation Market Harbor later this summer. So keep up with them and see some more of their awesome projects. And if you'd like to support, consider joining in on their membership. I have a link down to that down below as well. It's well worth it for their awesome updates and newsletters and just the feeling and understanding of helping some real professionals preserve history and keep it alive for the rest of us and for future generations. Take care, and I'll see you next time.